And there we are, live again, once again on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and I think the CCP is live streaming this across all of China. So good to have them with us today. They might black out some spots though. That's weird. Did you see that during the presidential thing, Ellen? Ran away alongside Dr. Lewald during the presidential debates where they were blacking out parts that they were critical of.
Uh-huh.
I was gonna kick out of that when we were there a year ago. Now a little bit over a year ago, something happened. I can't remember what it was, and the BBC was what was in the hotels. And then when they were start talking about stuff that would be kind of anti-China, it would just kind of go out and come back, go out and come out. And there's some kind of event. I have to go back and look at what it was that was going on in the world. There's always something. So, Dr. Wall, we're here. It is the last show of the year, which means it's time for, well, let's discuss it. I made a prediction. We don't have the audio queued up. I made a prediction that said that we would go sub 35 for at least a while. WTI. We are. This is December 28th, right? 20 something like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's not over. The fat lady sings, but she is back, warmed up. They've announced her name. She's walking on the stage. I think I will go ahead and concede. Unlike Trump, I will concede that I have lost this one, barring some kind of
major sell off in the next 3 days. Basically.
Major sell off in the next 3 days. So
yeah. Well, I think, Ryan, that despite the fact, not despite, but actually because of your incorrect prediction, we are going to award you with the Fauci-Ferguson Award for most incorrect prediction. And this award actually comes with the ability to continue to make predictions. The wronger they are, the more we will put you on TV and ask for your advice and your predictions about what is going to happen. So you're in the clear.
I won.
Yeah.
I won. Yay. Can I become a doctor too now? Can I come with something?
I think there's somewhere on the internet you can go and like fill out some forms and they'll like mail you something that says doctor.
Okay. Dr. Ol Ryan Ray here. As I stated on Twitter, just for our listeners, I wanted to be wrong because I knew the public couldn't take where Ol would really be. And so now that we're here and Ol is at 50, I'm glad that everyone's excited and so it was really just me moving the goalpost as the public perception polls were coming out. So. But
and you were just doing it to protect the people.
I was trying to protect the people.
You're trying to protect the people. You didn't think they could handle. They couldn't handle it.
They could not handle $50 Brent, $47 WTI. They could not handle it. That was outside of their ability to understand. So let's talk about the price of oil. Oil steadies as U.S. stimulus counters weak demand. Weak demand. Say what? Where did weak demand come from? I thought everything was good and rosy.
Yeah, so everything's good and rosy. Well, okay, so consumption definitely up over this holiday period. I predict, though, that come January 4th, it will not be so rosy. I mean, I guess we've got people traveling back, but we're probably going to see most travel on January 3rd, 2nd and 3rd, which is the weekend. And by January, I mean, look, schools aren't opening, or schools that have not been open are probably not going to open in January. And, we've got the same places locked down hard. I think now they're talking about New York is inching towards its 9% positivity rate that triggers some sort of additional lockdowns. Not really sure what more they're planning on locking down that they haven't locked down already. But, I'm speaking to you from the free state of Florida, where, when I moved to Jacksonville, I don't think I really appreciated Jacksonville as would be one of the freest cities in America. But apparently it is. I think that we're looking at not good demand in January, I think, at least in definitely Q1. However, I don't think that's going to stop anything. It's not going to stop oil prices. It's certainly not going to stop OPEC. I mean, OPEC is basically already okayed another 500,000 barrel per day increase. I mean, what was it that I think Novak basically tested it last week when he said he basically was that he said like, yeah, we're going to go ahead with this, and that was a market test, and I think that
Right.
passed. We're still just under, Brent's just under 52. They're going to meet on January 4th, so they're meeting what, next Monday.
Yeah.
So there's no reason, unless unless we have a huge sell off in the next 3 days. There's no good reason for them not to add more barrels.
Right. And so the question is, if you believe the price is right, then like you say, then add more barrels. If the price, as I thought, was overinflated, and it seems I'm a lone wolf there. At least
I
according
don't
to
think you're a lone wolf in thinking that. I mean, I think that the oil market's just not interested. They're interested in China. Now, if China doesn't buy as much as people think they're going to buy, that could put a damper on things. But I don't think that we will really see that until, for several months. I don't think we'll have any indication of that for several months. So, so I don't think that you're like totally off. Demand is really bad. I think that nobody cares, or the market doesn't care.
Yeah, I'm wondering, with the vaccine being distributed now, it seems every time I turn on, there's a new vaccine, a new country going out. So I wonder at what point, if the numbers continue to climb, does the market start to get concerned that the vaccine is taking longer to work, or to slow the case rate? Is there a chance in which the market looks at this and goes, well, we thought the vaccine was coming, and by the end of February, the cases should decline, and they're not, and the market has a sell off then? Or do you think by this point, with the vaccine in play, the market's kind of saying, okay, the vaccine's coming, things are just going to get better because the vaccine's coming, and therefore we're not worried about any kind of setback?
I think that's a really important question, because the market seems to think that the more people are vaccinated, the more economies will open up. And that is not entirely clear
Right.
right now. And that's a huge, huge issue that's going to have to be tackled, not just from the perspective of people who are looking at and concerned about oil demand, but from a general economic perspective. Because either you say you get the vaccine, you're protected, go out, live your life, don't worry about infecting other people,
Mhm.
even though you're not infectious. And I think that's a really big issue that no one's dealing with here, is like what is this deal? Like, is there really, if you have a vaccine, it's the same that you have antibodies. You're not going to, if you're exposed to the virus, your body will kill it before it makes you sick. That's the whole point, I believe. Not being like a biologist or anything, but I did take like biology in school, and we did cover this. So this is not like, I'm not saying like super complicated stuff.
Yeah.
So either you can or you can't. And so either they're going to have to relax things and say, yeah, you can go out, or the whole world's going to have to wait until the whole world is vaccinated. And then this thing is never going to end, because guess what? The whole world is never going to be vaccinated. Do you know how long it took for the whole world to be vaccinated against smallpox? A really long time.
Mhm.
We're still vaccinating people against polio.
Mhm.
Like, at a certain point, there's going to have to, and I know we have like Fauci moving the goalposts and all that stuff, but like there's going to have to become a point where either individuals say, okay, it's time to do stuff now. It's time to get in my car and drive. It's time to go on vacation. It's time to do this and that and the other thing. Or is it, like when is it time? And I think that there's definitely an optimism in the oil market that time is coming much sooner than I think that the political community says it is.
Yeah, and so
If
I
that
just
makes sense. I don't want
right.
to get too far afield of oil here,
Yeah, right,
but
right, yeah. So I just put out a link to folks who, Kaiser Fung, who's a data scientist statistician, and he's kind of been going through what Pfizer and Moderna's actual vaccination stuff is. So if you're curious about that, you might want to check that out. I do think, though, Ellen, I was reading some commentary today, and they talked about the markets are forward looking, and so I guess that's kind of my thing, is that at some point, I know, if the demand does not pick back up or things not return back to normal, the forward looking outlook. So let's go back last year, or not last year, earlier this year. We started heading down. We didn't know how far down we were going. We just knew we were going down with oil demand. Now we're going back up, and so the kind of anticipation that we're going to go up, we're not really sure where we're going to stop at. So at some point, we do have to level off, no matter if we go back to 100% reopen or a partial reopen or wherever we are. So once we level off and we kind of say this is where things are going to be for the time, I would expect there to be some sort of a sell off at that point, because it's hard to imagine the market's going to time it
yeah.
that right. And so if we do add 500,000 barrels a day with OPEC, And that's just
Yeah.
for January. February they could add another 500,000. If we don't have a sell off and the market is still kind of fat, if you will, you could see another 1 million barrels extra on the market from OPEC by the end of February, right?
Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah, a million extra from OPEC by February, and that's on top of Libya's Libyan oil production. And by the way, don't forget Iran here. Iran wants to increase its exports to 2.3 million barrels a day starting like March. I mean, their plan, they do their budgets in March because that's when the Iranian year turns over in March. So they're talking about a budget that has 2.3 million barrels a day of exported oil. Right now, Iran's exporting about one. So that's a pretty big increase
Yeah,
too.
that'd be a 1.3 million increase, and then potentially at least another 500,000 from OPEC, maybe a million, as we said. So that'd be a 2.3 million barrel per day increase by, you said, March.
Yeah, I mean, could be by March. Yeah, I mean, who knows? Does Iran mean legal exports? Do they mean
Right.
clandestine exports? What's the price they're selling this at? Who's buying? But it's definitely something to consider. And that and the other question you said, the oil market's forward looking. Like, how forward looking are we talking here?
Mhm.
Like, are we talking like they're forward looking to like the third quarter, the fourth quarter of 2021? Because I don't know if we're going to be where we think we're going to be, where we're mentally envisioning ourselves being by March. Though what's interesting, so Novak, who is no longer Russia's oil minister, he's like deputy prime minister, but he's still in charge of the OPEC stuff.
Mhm.
He said today, or maybe yesterday, I'm not exactly sure, but it was reported today that he sees right now we're like, I think it was like 7 million barrels below where we were in terms of demand. The market's like
Mhm.
7 million barrels below where it was. And he thinks that it's going to increase. He thinks we're going to get like 5 to 6 million barrels back, but not all the way. So yeah, okay. So world oil demand is still somewhere between 7 and 8 million barrels per day below pre-pandemic levels. He says that they expect further growth of only about 5 million to 6 million barrels per day next year. So I think that that's where they're going. So if they expect that growth, I'm guessing they think OPEC should jump on it now so that they're the
Right.
ones providing it.
Right, and yeah, because kind of goes back to that question about the monthly OPEC meetings. Will they be able to control the price? A little bit better than they have in the past. Okay, so let's go now. We talked about this from a different perspective a few weeks ago. Let me pull this up here on the thing so folks watching can see. Um, Japan to phase out gasoline-powered cars, bucking the Toyota chief. Now he came out. That's been the last month saying basically, we're not a fan of this kind of going to the EVs. And then now by the mid-30s, Japan is saying, hey, we're going to go get away from the gasoline powered car. And just as an aside, when not a Japanese energy expert here, but it's not like that's a island flush with resources as it is. They're very dependent on importing. Um,
Not just that, do you know where their biggest source of electricity is? I think it's coal.
well, okay, so I know at one time they had they had like 7 nuclear plants, and then after Fukushima, they took, I think, some of them off. Now they're trying to bring them back, so they have a
Yeah.
problem. They kind of get tied up geopolitically with who are they buying their energy resources from, because sometimes it's not a U.S. ally or whatever. But the EV thing's interesting because um, you're then being dependent on foreign entities to buy batteries from. I don't know. It seems like it's a weird strategy for them to kind of put all their chips in that basket when they don't have a lot of diversity on the island as it is. And so if you had gasoline, you had EV, you can kind of go back and forth. But if you're saying we're getting rid of gasoline cars, we're going
Hmm.
to phase them out.
Here's something interesting. So February 3rd, 2020, there's an article talking about how Japan is trying to build more coal burning plants.
Mm,
It says they planned, at least back in February, to build as many as 22 new coal burning power plants at
mhm,
17 different sites over the next 5 years. So if they want to increase their EVs and increase their coal, then you're basically running your car on coal.
mm, mhm. Right. Well, and then if you look at this piece in the Wall Street Journal, it says that
Together, wait, get this stat. The 22 power plants would emit almost as much carbon dioxide annually as all the passenger cars sold each year in the United States.
Wow, that's a lot of carbon. So check this out. It says earlier this month, Toyota president, I can't get his name right, Aki Toyoda, the Toyota,
Toyota.
Toyota,
Mm.
said that if Japan banned gasoline powered cars and moved to electric vehicles hastily, the current business model of the car industry is going to collapse. He's speaking on behalf of Japanese automakers in his role. Mr. Toyoda said the electricity grid couldn't handle the extra summer demand and observed that most of Japan's electricity is generated by burning fossil fuels. So there's as you mentioned, there's the element of the fossil fuel, which set that aside. He's saying that the grid cannot handle the extra demand from having this
Mhm.
many EVs on the grid, and that's one of the things that always gets lost in these debates. You talk about California or wherever. If you move to all EVs, the grid that you have now will no longer work.
No, not at all. And could you imagine? So, and then the California fires come along and everyone wants to evacuate and the power's
Yeah.
out. Oops, you can't charge your car.
Mm,
Can't
right.
go anywhere.
Now it does say that they're allowed to be the hybrids, so you can have the
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say, what is so wrong with hybrids? Like, I mean, I get they're expensive, but like, why must we all move to like total like EVs? Hybrid, I mean, why not hybrids? I mean, I think that like they're not always so great. Like they're quite very expensive, but like so are a lot of EVs. Why don't you focus more on reducing the cost of providing, subsidies or whatever it is that they want? If you're in the business of providing subsidies and stuff, why not do it for something that people will actually be incentivized to purchase and won't overload your electricity grid in the same time?
yeah.
That would be too logical.
Yeah, very far too logical. Far too logical. These predictions are kind of like oil prices. I'm not sure you should put a whole lot of stock into them.
Well, that's one other thing. Okay, let's talk about it because that's one other issue, which is a lot of these countries are like, we're going to phase out all internal combustion engines by the year 2030, or we're going to do this by 2050 or 2042 or whatever the heck.
Mm,
Okay, well, it's still 2020, so the soonest prediction is in like 10 years.
right.
There will definitely, and all of these democracies doing it, there will be totally different governments who
Mm,
are not necessarily going to be bound by these like declarations. So I just think like you have to say like half of this is for politics or PR or whatever you call it, because any and all of these things can be undone and almost definitely will be undone in some way.
yeah. Well, when people start, when the cost of living goes up, and because as you go through and have to revamp your electricity grid, someone's got to pay those costs, right? The electricity company's not going to say, "Hey, we're going to add more wire, more high lines, and more substations, and we're not going to bring in all this extra ability to handle more base load." But don't worry, your costs will be the same. They're gonna pass it along to the good old consumer. So,
You
uh,
know what? We could create a system where we both promote healthy habits and electric vehicles. They should all come with like hookups to like some sort of bicycle or like thing where you can basically just sit and like pedal your bicycle to charge your car. Because like we have these flashlights where you crank them,
oh yeah,
so
yeah, yeah,
like great thing to have. So why doesn't it come, healthy habits? Spend 5 hours riding, your indoor bike while
like a
you
Peloton for
watch
your Peloton,
Netflix,
yeah,
and you'll get 5 minutes of charge on your car.
yeah. Your Peloton now charges your car. I like that idea. I like that idea.
Hey,
Okay, let's go
health.
to.
We promote healthy habits.
There we go. You got your what was your cracker from last week?
Yeah, my carbon. Yeah, I'm from my carbon neutral cracker
Carbon neutral cracker.
and
Yeah,
the
yeah,
Peloton.
Peloton charging idea. I like it. I like it. Okay.
Hey.
Asia's oil sector in 2021. China drives recovery, strengthens status as refining center. Um, okay, Miss Wald, I have to ask you this question. How confident are you that China's response over the past 6 to 8 months of the oil market, them buying up oil, is not going to be used against the market as prices rise?
Yeah, so this is a big debate that yeah. So China can just say, price is too high, 60's too much, so we're gonna pull out our inventory, pull out of our inventory, flood the local market with cheap products, right?
Hmm.
That's the idea. I think they'd be stupid not to. On the other hand, just like they've still got big major contracts that they
Hmm.
so there's a certain level of demand I think that will be maintained, but we're all looking at everything after that demand. And you know, I think it's absolutely an issue that we could see, but we're also looking at a China that is planning to increase its storage capacity in a major way and open new refineries. They So while they may rely somewhat on pulling from storage, they're going to be buying anyway.
So, well, okay. So let tease that out real quick. If they're going to increase their storage, though, it behooves them to buy at cheaper prices. So the more they can push the price back down and then buy it back up,
So it's kind of like a balance, like a
yeah,
little up, a little down, a little up, a
go up
little
a little bit,
down.
right. Or just keep it where it's at, as long as it's not too far out of whack. So I'm not thinking they really won't. I just, I could see that's
I mean, how
good.
much is too high for them? Like, what do you think? Like, what's the number? What's the number at which, like, I don't think we want to buy? And how much? And how do they not? Can't they just kind of communicate that? And then the next thing you'll do is you'll see, like, um, ADNOC and Aramco lowering their OSPs to Asia.
I think you have to wonder how much Russia's signals to the market is coming from China.
Hmm.
You know, I mean, because if China, if let me ask you this: if Xi Jinping called up Putin, he's like, "Listen, bro, listen, these prices are getting too high. Y'all need to put some more barrels on the market." I know Russia and China have a contentious history, and they're not necessarily allies, but they are pretty close right now. Um, do you, how would that go over in Russia? Because there's a lot of trade going back and forth there.
Oh yeah, and there's a big pipeline
Yeah.
flowing oil. Yeah, I don't. I think that China would probably be more than. Remember, Russia sets its budget at like $40 oil,
Hmm.
so they're happy with like 52, 55. They
Yeah,
don't.
I think
Don't.
what
I don't think
Putin's
they want
concerned, right?
65.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So if China's calling and saying, "Hey, listen, we're getting close to this price point here. We need you guys to put some pressure on the market." You know. So where do you think Russia wants it at optimally?
Probably 55, 57.
And so then you think
I'm
China,
just totally guessing on that, by the way.
yeah,
That's just like my gut. It's not based on like any secret knowledge of like Novak and
Novak
Putin's,
Putin didn't call you up, WhatsApp
yeah,
you and say, "This is what the price is."
yeah. So whoever's listening should just take that with a grain of salt.
Yeah. Well, it seems that once you get over 60, the price does begin to start getting expensive, regardless of where you're at, right?
Yeah, of course, if the reason it's 60 is because like Aramco's like oil facilities got bombed or
Right.
like Biden decides to shut down all oil production in the United States, then Russia is very happy and will happily have
Right.
$80 oil. So
Right. The other thing I thought was interesting from this piece is this oil demand in 2021 is now expected to come in at 99.53 billion barrels a day. Can we just call it 100 billion barrels a day? Can we just call
no, no, we cannot.
it
We
100
must be
million?
percent.
Sorry. We
Can't
can't.
do that. That would be too much.
Which would mean, if this prediction is right, that we're back to pre-pandemic oil demand levels in 2021, according to Platts.
Yeah, well, Novak doesn't seem to agree.
Well, no, but I'm saying, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not sure we'll be back that soon or not either. I don't know, but you know, we did have multiple people say that the end of peak, we're at peak demand already. Like we'll never go back.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
BP would like to disagree. They believe we have already reached peak demand.
it's like I saw oil price. Their editorial staff or someone was like saying, "Yeah, this could be it." And I mean, Platts to their credit, they didn't put the 100 million because they didn't want to get called out. But I mean, 9.25.3. Come on, right? We're there.
Yeah.
It's the same
China
thing.
and India will lead the way also. Yeah, we don't talk enough about India. I think we need to talk more. That's a resolution. We need to talk more about Indian demand in 2021.
Okay, let's make a prediction now. Indian demand will be something we will talk about.
I think we should.
We can talk about that. Okay. Yeah. Do you have a thesis on what we might see from India in 2021?
So I think that India is going to grow. The Indian market is going to grow. I think that we're going to see a lot more collaboration between between Middle Eastern national oil companies and the Indian refining market. I mean, India has big companies that are involved in refining. I think that we're going to see expansions of that. I think Russia's going to, Russia's in there. I think that India is one of those countries where, I mean, I think the big news is going to be Tesla is going to expand to India in 2021, but we're talking about a very, very, very tiny portion of the population. And, there are a lot of people in India who can't afford, almost anything. But if, things are going to be improving, if general, economic progress, then you're going to have more demand for fuel. And so I think that I don't think that India is going to become like China in terms of like building massive stores of oil and having this robust independent kind of refining industry that distributes to like the area. But I do think that, like that as a whole. So I don't see India becoming like the next China, but I do think it will become a greater factor in terms of market share and demand.
Yeah. So here's a comment. I guess there have been activities in the Middle East and Baghdad rockets landed near embassies. Prices didn't react. I wrote an article for Xinhua, the Chinese newspaper, almost a year ago now, when they bombed the base in Iraq. And if you remember, the price just kind of this really didn't react. This is something the market. And I think Ellen, you did something for maybe ForbesBest.com a little bit over a year ago now. Talking about when the Saudis had the Iranian rockets blew up. Was it one of the refineries? Not the refineries, but they had attack there. That was kind of the most that we've seen in
Yeah.
recent memory. An attack actually have any kind of impact on the oil market, and that only lasted 3 weeks, something like that. It feels like those days are really gone, where the attacks now move the market anymore.
Yeah, they don't move the market at all. I think it's all demand. I think it's also like there's always rockets heading to Baghdad. And the truth is that there are things that happen in Iraq that could affect the market. Iraq is like the second largest producer in OPEC. So if Iraqi oil production is actually affected, that could be a thing. And we did see, in fact, there was some day this month, I don't remember what it was, but we saw there was some sort of like sabotage or explosion at an oil pipeline and oil fields in northern Iraq, and the market reacted very briefly. It like shot up and down, and I think that it shot up because before people realized like it was a totally inconsequential like attack, and there were like 10,000 barrels affected. But yeah, I don't think that there's a sense that like it's going to lead to some sort of big conflagration. However, and I know that there's this like idea that like, oh, Trump is like a loose cannon and who knows when we're going to start a war. I think that he was like pretty much basically like against any further like escalation of actual like military stuff in the region. And I think that that idea that's needs to be reevaluated with Biden, because we have no idea. Like they could be full of neocons who want to like start wars everywhere. So rockets, hitting the U.S. area in Baghdad could mean like a second invasion of Iraq for all we know.
Right.
I just think we don't know what the policy really is going to be and how it's going to be formed, and so that could definitely be a thing that the oil market should react to in the future, even if it's not even if I think it's rightfully not reacting to it now.
Well, okay, so let me ask you this, as the put your historian hat on here. If you go back from since 9/11 to now, basically, I would guess in modern times at least, the tension in the Middle East from wars and fighting has been the highest in modern history, right? Because the U.S. has been over there. It's November, December, whatever it was when we invaded Afghanistan. more or less, we've been over there perpetually in a war since then. And then we went to Iraq. And in that time period, you obviously have the U.S. shale revolution that comes online. So my question is, do, with the shale revolution in the U.S. and the fact that we've been in wars for going on 20 years now, maybe those things just don't move the market. Whereas in like 1996, you were afraid of some pipeline being blown up and where we get the oil from. Now there's always bombs going off, as you say, and we have other spots to get the oil from.
Yeah, and I think that it takes the market a really long time to come to that realization, because there was a time when there was like stuff going on in Syria and the oil market jumped. And they're like, that has zero effect on the oil market at all. Like, there's no oil in Syria. If Syria and Israel go to war, there's no effect on oil. Like, unless you have like some sort of like Arab League thing where everybody else also jumps in on the war, including the big oil producers. That was the old paradigm, exactly, from like the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s. That was the old paradigm. And I think it took the world, like it took the market a long time to get out of that paradigm to the point where they stop reacting so much. Like, look at what happened with Aramco, which rightfully those attacks did actually take out a very significant amount of oil, not for that long. Okay. Right. But like, the market was right to react as it did, because it actually did affect oil. And then the fallout could have affected things going forward. But I think the fact that it didn't spike more was because of the vast amount of oil in the world, partially because, the US doesn't get very much oil now from Saudi Arabia and from OPEC in general. Didn't Dr. Foreman say that like in November, we imported a record low amount of oil from OPEC members, like going back to when they started keeping records? I think he said that.
Yeah, that sounds. I have to look at we've hit the low on imports a couple times, and since
but this is like a low on imports from OPEC members.
Oh, okay, yeah, maybe so.
Yeah. So so I think it just takes like the market a while to like adjust paradigms, because they're so used to like seeing like tension in the Middle East. Let's hit the buy button or something. And it'll be interesting. The paradigm can still change, obviously. And it'll be interesting to see how long it takes to shift to a new paradigm, or will that happen much faster because there's so much more trading going on these days than there was then like in the 90s.
So I'm curious about new paradigms. Have you followed any of the Australian-China coal debate? Not debate, the kerfuffle that's going on there?
I actually have not. Okay. All I know is that Australia wants to sell them coal.
Yeah, and so China, there's I think it's like 40 vessels in the various ports of China that are sitting there. Some have the coal has been purchased, and China will not take the coal. It's just sitting there in port. So
have China, they adopted some new carbon neutral like thing that
there's a whole China Australia deal, which if you're curious, you can go read the newsletter from a week ago. I had a guy on talk about it, but that's neither here nor there. But what's interesting is that these so China's having blackouts, but the coal to fuel their power plants is in their ports, but they won't import it. They're leaving it out there because they're trying to get it to Australia. My question is, if there were tankers in Chinese ports with oil, and China's like, we're not going to take this oil right now, what would that do to the oil market? That would be a new paradigm where the oil market might go, oh my God, China's not going to buy oil anymore, or what are they doing, or what's going on? Would that be something enough to shift the market where you have a sell off going, oh wow, China's backing off the oil purchasing now?
Yeah, that's really interesting. So I think that the key difference here is, why is China not taking the oil? Because we actually did have a situation earlier this year where there was oil sitting in tankers off various ports in China that was not being offloaded. Now, the reason it was not being offloaded was because there was like construction at one of the ports that was going on way longer than it was supposed to, and they couldn't offload it. And there were other issues in terms of like not enough storage. There were like, it was technical. It wasn't a geopolitical spat where they were like, we don't like your oil, or we don't like your policy on, pandas, so we're not going to import your coal. Sorry, pandas are like a cause for me. I think we need to free the pandas.
Free the pandas. Yeah, so this is
I know the Chinese will hate me for saying that, but like, free the pandas, guys.
But What would that do if they said to the Saudis or the U.S. or to the Russians, we're not going to take this oil, we're going to leave it out at port?
Well, what would it do to like the ship? Like, oh my! Well, first of all, I think you'd see the traders would like lose it. Like I could see like steam, just like Vital and like these and Trafigura, like steam would be like coming out of their ears. They'd be like, "Oh my god, we got to resell these cargoes. Where are we going to resell them to?" Like I think it would be like, oh my god, it would be fascinating. Sorry, that sounds horrible, but like that would be a fascinating situation to watch. I'd love these people who do like war games and stuff.
Mhm.
Like when they
Yeah.
like game out. I would love to like watch a
Yeah.
gaming situation for that because it's got like the traders involved and you've got like the governments and you've got the refinery. Like, wow. Yeah. Anyone who does these simulations, like,
Yeah, let us
you
know.
should run this one. I want to watch.
I have wondered because we were looking 2 years ago, I guess now, to bring in some stuff from South Africa, and so we weren't going to we didn't own the ship. We were just renting space on a ship if we were to bring this in. And you start getting those contracts, it's very much you got to pay this much when it crosses this threshold in the ocean, and it's got to be delivered by this date. And there's all these weird provisions, like we're looking at insurance, and the insurance. I think it was a Russian submarine. The insurance wouldn't cover it if the ship was sank by a Russian submarine or something like that. I'm serious. It was something weird like that.
Wow.
And you're like, how many Russian submarines are out there? But anyways, there's all these weird provisions on the insurance. I think if it sank in the harbor by a hurricane, it wouldn't be covered. And so I'm just curious on the coal stuff. Someone knows these ships that have been paid for. What's going on, because those ships had schedules to be somewhere else, and so is China going to pay the backlog?
Ha 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 ha. Is China gonna pay?
Is China going to pay? They've already paid for the coal, so like, is the crew getting overtime? Are they there? It's just interesting.
Yeah.
You've got ships in your port, and you're just like, yeah, whatever. So, anyways, okay, let's go to our next one here. Carbon prices jump despite record drop in emissions. Color me stunned once again, Walt. Here we go. Carbon prices are up, and the European Union's decision to curb greenhouse gases is driving the latest rally, putting carbon credits on par with gold.
Oh, carbon credits are like gold.
They're like gold.
That's like the key thing. That was a good one. That's who wrote this art. David Hodari wrote this article. I love David. David's great. That was a good one.
Carbon credits tied carbon emissions. Credits tied to carbon emissions are having a banner year despite a record drop in output from the power plants and steel mills that need them to operate. That seems odd, right?
Yeah, well, they created this situation whereby, remember, we were looking at these things like declare themselves like carbon neutral. It doesn't mean that they have like mice in treadmills providing their energy, or like people on bikes.
Yeah, no Pelotons are going.
No Peloton. Yeah, what they mean is they bought carbon offsets. They bought credits, which is fine if you want to spend your money on that. But like, look what it's doing to the carbon market. So you end up having people like putting, solar and wind and stuff into commission just to sell more credits, because the credits are valuable, because there's a whole market for credits. As opposed to like, imagine if you just set up a solar farm and it doesn't even like provide that much power to anyone, but like imagine the amount of credits you can sell from it. It's like a whole market of stuff that doesn't actually do nothing.
Okay, so
at least ethanol has a purpose. Like I get, like I'm not in favor of putting more ethanol into cars than is necessary to get rid of the MB methyl tetrabutide or something, which is like bad and can cause cancer. So ethanol replaces that. Great. Excellent. We should not be putting more cancer-causing stuff into this world. There's enough stuff that causes cancer. But like when if you're just putting more ethanol in the fuel just for the sake of it, like I don't like. Not good. It's basically like this. You've created this like artificial market for stuff that doesn't really do anything except satisfy government regulation.
That reminds me. I've got my notes right here. We had a listener reach out about the Exxon deal. And so we didn't talk about this last week, did we?
I don't think so.
Okay, so
let me remember. We might have, but I don't.
We had the Exxon story like 3 weeks ago from Bloomberg Green about they were going to sequester the oil, store the oil, not the oil, the carbon in the ground. Okay, so a listener reached out. It's been more than 3 weeks ago. Anyways, a listener reached out. Works for an operator, and if I get any of this wrong, it's just me because he's a genius. I know this guy, pretty smart guy. Anyways, and he explained to me. So essentially, Ellen, in the U.S., there are 3 basic ways, and I believe it's called a 45Q permit that you've got to get. Anyways, that you can sequester carbon. One is, as you mentioned, trees. So you can get mitigation credits where you can more or less pay someone to, this is the simple version, you can pay someone to plant trees or to do something to kind of offset your carbon output. The second
That's
way
kind of
is,
cool. I want to be like the designated tree planter.
right, you see this with pipelines also. They'll get mitigation credits for going through wetlands. So someone goes and builds one on their behalf or whatnot. The next one is for enhanced oil recovery, so you can take the carbon and then cycle it back into the drilling to do it. And the third way is to store it, which is what Exxon was talking about doing it. Now, again, this is where I took notes. It's been a few weeks, but my understanding, if I heard him correctly, was it's called the EPA Title VI. I think is the permit you have to get, and it takes 5 years to get one. And I think one
Whoa.
two ever issued, and they're both in Illinois. And to get one of
Oh,
these,
those are for those big carbon capture plants that they were supposed
Yeah.
to build in Illinois. Yeah, I wrote about that like in 2012 for
Right.
some article for a chapter in a book. Wow, we're still
Right.
talking about that.
Yeah. So if you wanted to get the full carbon credit deal and you're going to store it, you had to get this EPA permit. But he was explaining that if you think of it like this, if you're going to put the carbon back in the ground, one of the things that you have to do is you have to put it so far deep that no one will ever drill through that area again. Because if they drill through it, it's just going to come back up the drill hole, right? And so it has to be thick rock and all this stuff. So, anyways, I found all of that fascinating. A long way of saying that he would his take on the Exxon deal, if I remember correctly, was they're probably going to do this, maybe try to get all the credits, but it's just not economical, especially when prices of oil were so low. So that's why they quit doing it, which makes sense to me. But anyways, there are 3 ways that you could get some of those tax carbon credits, and storing it's one of them. But to actually get the full credit, it's really long process and really hard. So they are.
I'd love to hear from a tree planter. Like the person, like or like a company whose like entire purpose is to like plant trees for companies that are paying to offset their.
That's the business I'm gonna go into. Is
Yeah.
arborist? Is that what they're called?
Arborist. Oh yeah.
Arborist. Yeah.
Arborists.
I'm gonna be an arborist. I'm just gonna go plant trees on behalf of the oil and gas industry.
Yeah.
I'll be a tree hugger for oil and gas.
That's awesome. That is the greatest thing. I think we should do that.
There we go. Okay, let's see here. A couple more. Let's see here, Miss Wald.
What should we do?
Biden
Shale or Biden on the China deal?
Let's hit Biden real quick on the China deal. Biden camp adds pressure on EU to hit brakes on China deal. The European Union came under mounting pressure to slow down its push for a major investment deal with China as opposition grew to an agreement with Beijing that fails to tackle forced labor, aka the Uyghur camps and all of the other stuff that goes on in China. Ms. Walton, I've been saying for some time, and I probably need to write something about this because I haven't. China's whole position right now really depends on EU backing them. Because if the EU does not back China, they will have nowhere to turn to. You got Russia or whatever, but you need some real allies. I say allies in air quotes. You need some real partners that will work with you. Part of the Biden administration was multilateral, multinational. He can bring together allies. Bloomberg and all the other smart folks ran articles telling us that when Biden came in, China was going to hate it because he was going to be able to rally the troops. Can Biden put any pressure on the EU to get help against China?
I heard that this deal's going through, so it would seem like no, but I don't know. I haven't got confirmation or anything, but I'm pretty sure I read that. I thought this deal was going. This article is from a little while ago. It's from
December 23rd.
December 23rd.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's actually from last week because I hadn't found anything else, but it does seem like they want to move forward. I mean, I don't think they're doing anything until after New Year's, but I don't know. The Biden multilateralism. Well, I'm sure they'll just blame it on Trump. So.
Well, but let's talk about it from an energy standpoint. I mean, you have the phase 1 trade deal. Have you heard anything about Biden's thoughts on what he's going to do with that?
Zero. All I remember is from the debates, no one was saying we have to get rid of the tariffs. They were all like, it's a bad idea. It's so bad, but no one would say that they would just get rid of them.
Mhm, mhm.
So my thought is that actually they don't think it's such a bad idea. They just didn't want to be the ones to actually put them on because they would lose political points with people, and like farmers and stuff would get hurt. So, but once Trump put them on, then they can play with them how they desire.
Right.
At least
Okay.
that's my reading.
I yeah, I'm curious to see how Biden. I feel like Biden is going to have to be tough on China because there's a lot of pressure in DC, but also whatever you think about the Hunter Biden stuff, the perception that he would be soft on them, you know, is there regardless. So,
Yeah.
okay, one quick story: an analyst, U.S. shale oil just had its worst year, and the pain could bleed into 2021. Could bleed.
Good.
Could
Is currently
will.
bleeding.
It's already there, waiting. It's already there, pulled up in 2021, waiting for us to step into it. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, U.S. oil and gas shares and drilling activity are edging higher, but a disastrous year for the energy industry means the go days of the shale boom may be gone for good. Now, this is really dependent on economic recovery and stuff like that. Curious your thoughts. A lot of people have said that we have peaked in U.S. shale drilling. We will never get back to that.
Do we need to get back to 13 million barrels a day to have a robust shale oil industry? Do we really need 13? I mean, like, really, do we really need to pump that much? I'm not convinced that we do. Okay, so the shale industry is pumping, it says they're pumping 7.44 million barrels a day, which is down 20% from the beginning of 2020.
Mhm,
First
mhm.
of all, that means there's a lot that's available. Like I don't think that not you know not going back up to where we were does not mean that they're dead. I think that because they've operated so long on increased growth as opposed to, oh, let's see, are we a profitable enterprise, and they've just done everything on like growth fumes or a lot on growth fumes, that once the prospect of growth is gone, they're calling it dead. But I don't think that means it's dead. It just means a new model.
Yeah.
So this is going to be like shale 4.0 or whatever. I don't know what we're up to now.
Well, so yeah, I think like this. So we had on talk about Dean Foreman. We had him on at one point, and there was talk about maybe the airline industries might shut down flights to certain areas, and we've seen some of that's kind of happened, and it might reshape economies because of that. That is something that is primarily a result of the lockdowns, the shutdowns, and the COVID-19. Okay, with the oil and gas in the U.S., I think everyone agreed, or most people agreed, that moving forward before the pandemic, that by 2025, 2030, what the shale patch looked like was not what it looked like in 2012, 2013, 2014, etc. And we were going to see a lot more companies, M&A, mergers where they come together, or companies going bankrupt, or whatever, and the feel would be different. And so what 2020 did was it kind of, I don't want to say got us there quicker because that's not necessarily true, but it did kind of speed up that process um, the most painful way possible. Whereas the airline industry is impacted in a way that it wouldn't have been impacted if things would have just stayed the course. The oil and gas industry on some level was going for a revamping and a reshaping, it seems like. And that might have led to lower production. It might have led to a lot of things. It was just going to look different, I think, by the mid 20s. And now we've just kind of gotten there a different route. Would you agree with that analysis?
Absolutely. I think we're in the middle of it. We're still in the middle of it. It's going to continue, and like this is another iteration.
So let me ask you this. We'll go with this one. Do you think if the bigger companies take stronger foothold out in the Permian and North Dakota or wherever, New Mexico, that we'll see debates internally of these companies of, they've got, higher or lower break evens potentially in some other country. It's higher in the U.S. And so they're cutting U.S. production, but they're bolstering across the seas, and they'll get some pushback from their shareholders because they're kind of pushing back against the American first energy policies.
I think that could be possible, except that I have a hard time seeing it happen with if they're in shale. Like if they
Mhm.
were talking big big projects and stuff, like large scale, like big capital expenditures, projects that are going to take several years just to develop, I think that we could see them pursue those kinds of projects abroad at the expense of those projects in the US. But I think that everyone sees shale as much more of a like short term project. So, put some money in, it'll produce, you'll reap it now, but you can't expect it, the same wells are not going to be producing in, 10, 15 years. So I think it's a different, it's almost like they're in totally different categories. Like you can't compare like Guyana, development of offshore Guyana oil to, a
Permian.
well in the Permian.
Right. No, I agree. Okay. Miss Wald, will you be anywhere this week? Or are you taking off this week? Or
Let's see. I was on Bloomberg TV earlier today. I will be on investing.com and Forbes. And I'm taking tomorrow afternoon off because it's my birthday. So.
All right. Well, I will be back at the War Room newsletter, so check that out. And I believe that's it. And
Happy New Year, everyone!
That's right. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year!
I was talking to someone today, and they're like, it's the end of the year, but the next year is just the new day. I'm like, I get it, but just calendar.
Are we making any resolutions? I think I did not achieve a single one of my resolutions from last year. In fact, I think I regressed. So I may not resolve.
Good. I felt pretty good January, February, and then March.
Everything just died. Everything fell apart.
Yeah. So my resolution is it can't be as bad as it was this year.
Yeah.
Surely.
Marginal improvements here.
Yeah. So, happy birthday, Dr. Wald, and then happy New Year to all of our listeners around the world. We've got folks listening from all over the place. So we will be back not next week, but next year.